What's going on, my reefing fan? March here, Fragbox TV, and today I'm going to talk to you about how much it costs to start your very own saltwater aquarium. So this is a question we get a lot here in the store. How much does it cost to start a saltwater tank? If you're new to the channel, please subscribe below. Let me tell you a little bit about us first and where we're coming from. So we are a store here in the Toronto area that specializes in saltwater aquariums. That is what we do. That is our love, our passion, our store, our business, our life, our everything. Corals are our real specialty. That's where our real love comes from, especially coral frags. If you haven't already figured it out from the name, frag box. Why is it called frag box? Because we take these small little frags, fragment of coral, and we ship them right across the country in these specially insulated styrofoam containers. Frag plus box, that's frag box. And we also sell a small collection of saltwater fish, but only captive bred fish. And I'll touch on that in a later video, why we only sell fish that aren't taken from the wild and only bred in captivity. This is our friendly bulldog, our store mascot, Mr. Diggs. We also sell a bunch of cleanup crew, like shrimp, snails, crabs, all that fun stuff that goes inside of your reef tank, your janitors, more or less. This is Tia, our store manager. This is Dylan, our resident coral surgeon. And there's a couple other staff members that aren't here today, but we all share the same passion and love for reef keeping that goes into this hobby here. Now that we got that out of the way, that's my longest probably sidetrack ever. Let's talk about what it costs to start a saltwater aquarium. I'm gonna break this video down into 3 different sizes. So your nano size, which is between, I would say, 5 and 20 gallons, like these ones over here. And then your mid-range size, this is kind of, well, no, this is a 55 gallon or 60 gallon tank. So I would say that's about standard size for a saltwater tank. And then a little bit on the larger side. So this is 90 gallons, or we'll maybe round up to like 100 or 120. And we'll price them all out so that you can kind of get an idea of what it costs to set one of these things up. I'm also going to break down for each individual tank size 3 different budgets. So a very basic, or we'll call the cheap budget, as budget friendly as possible. And then we'll also do a mid-range budget. So some better equipment, stuff that is a little bit better than the budget friendly. And then finally we'll do a baller sort of setup with the best of the best equipment if cost wasn't an issue and you were going with just the most extreme or just the most badass equipment. And why we're going to do it like that is because when it comes to equipment for saltwater tank, there's quite a large variation depending on what you go with. I'm going to use pumps for an example just to explain. You could go with sort of an inexpensive pump for a 100-gallon tank that'll run you $100. Or there's this brand here from the US, Ecotech Marine, which makes some awesome equipment, and a pump from them will run you $500. They both move water. They both sort of have the same function. One is way more expensive. I'm going to explain why in the video, but it can greatly increase the overall price or budget of your aquarium. The hardware can definitely make or break the big. All right, look at all this fun stuff. So I'm going to run you through the basic essentials to set up a saltwater tank, and we're going to start with the Nano, and we're going with the Fluval Evo 13.5 gallon. Let me tell you why we went with this one over some of the other ones. This here is another option, JBJ 10 gallon. Love this tank. It'll run $180 here in Canada with the stand closer to $300, no light included. It does come with a pump. This is also another great option for small tank, first time tanks. It's a Fusion 20. It's a 20 gallon from a company called Innovative Marine. We absolutely love it. It runs $400, also no lights. So I'm not sure this is a fair one to price out. Why I'm going with the Evo is just because on the cheaper end, it comes with the light included, with the hood, with the filter, with the pump, with just about everything you sort of need to get going, plus a couple accessories I'm going to run you through. So let me give you the 3 different price point breakdowns for this tank right here, which it happens to be our most popular reef tank here in the store. So you're going to need, at a bare minimum to get going, you're going to need some sand, which will run you 20 bucks or 25. You're going to need some rock. So no matter which budget friendly one, which package you go with, I'll start with the least expensive one. You're going to need that at a bare minimum. A Python, what we use here for water changes, some starting bacteria, so some BioS and ammonia chloride. You're going to need a heater, This Cobalt 75 one works well, 3-year warranty, made in Italy. You're going to need a thermometer and a power head. We like the Cice over here, great nano pump for most small aquariums. You're going to need something to measure your salt. So on the cheaper one, we're pricing in a hydrometer because it's 15 bucks. And then you're going to need some test kits. On the cheaper version, we're going to price in this. All you really need is the nitrate. Go back and see our other video we did on cycling a reef tank. These ones are good to get, ammonia and nitrite, but for this budget-friendly build, we're just going to price in the nitrate. For all the bare essentials, just to get it up and running, the aquarium alone runs 200. Like I said, that's going to get you the hood, the light, the pump, the filter, and the tank, no stand included. With all the extra essentials that you need, comes out to $440 Canadian. That works out to about 330 American dollars. I know that a lot of our viewers are in the US. For our medium-sized build, so let's say we use the same tank and we take the same bare essentials. So the rock we don't change because you're going to need the rock, the python, and the sand, but we're going to throw in instead the heater will stay the same bacteria, the same thermometer, and a little bit better pump. So this is a Jabao wave maker. So instead of just a standard power head, this one will be able to be controlled. So you can actually dial the strength and control the type of flow. We upgrade the light to this awesome Aquanite V2. Almost everything that I'm calling out in this video, we've done other videos on, so you can go and check them out. So like this light right here, we have a review video and a par demonstration video and a programming video on our channel for it running over the Fusion 20. Same goes for the pump. And then instead of using a hydrometer to measure the salt here, we're upgrading to a refractometer, which is my preferred method. This is a lot better than a hydrometer. Big price difference. This is 10 or 15 bucks. This will run 7 to 75 bucks. And then again, the same test kits, except we're going to add in the nitrite and the ammonia. So if that's not making sense and you're new to saltwater, just look up the nitrogen cycle to better understand what's going on there. With those upgraded parts, you're getting a little bit better of a tank. It's going to run you $700, which works out to, in American dollars, oh, I forgot to mention the salt. We're pricing in a $40 bucket of Red Sea Coral Pro. And why are we pricing this in? Because that's the same salt we use on every single aquarium here in our store. That's our preferred brand of salt. That's what we use and trust. That's our most popular one that we sell the most of. It's just a good all-around salt to use. So in American dollars, that'll run $525. Now, finally, let's say we're gonna do a really solid build and cost is no object. We really want the best of the best. We're still gonna need the tank, the rock, the sand, the siphon, but we're gonna use Dr. Tim's one and only when it comes to adding our bacteria to get on the rock, and we're going to add some ammonia chloride. We're going to upgrade to the Neotherm for the heater, which is a ceramic, shatterproof, highly reliable, accurate heater, and we're going to go with a badass AI Nero 3, best of the best in my opinion when it comes to small wave maker controllable pumps. You got to check this thing out on our other videos. Really awesome product. A Cybon refractometer, which is our preferred way of measuring salt, a Marine Care all-in-one test kit, and finally, la creme de la creme, the AI Prime 16 HD. It can't get better than this for LED lighting over a small tank. This is just really the king of practical American brand name, Wi-Fi, built-in, controllable, full spectrum LED. Can't say enough good things about the light, and the same one that we happen to be running on our reef tank here in the store. So if we take all of that equipment for our more expensive build, the total comes out to 1,160 Canadian dollars, or about 850 US dollars. But that's a solid setup. There's really nothing I could see that you'd want to upgrade, and you're going to get something very close to what we're running here in the store. Very similar setup to what we have going on here. So that's kind of the difference between $400 and closer to 1,200 bucks. So quite a large variation. So when people ask us how much to start a saltwater tank, it's really going to come down to your budget. I'm going to run through the next two sort of builds in a second, but it's kind of like going onto a used car lot or a car dealership and saying, I'd like to buy a car. Well, what's your budget like? You want to buy a 20-year-old used car for $1,000, or you're looking for a brand new Mercedes S65 AMG and you have 150 grand to drop? Saltwater aquariums in that respect are sort of the same. So your budget's going to dictate the kind of hardware you're going to get. So on that smaller tank, somewhere between 400 and 1,200 Canadian dollars. It's triple the cost on the more high-end one, but it really comes down to your budget and what you're comfortable spending. Before I go any further, let me just mention that any of the costs we're talking about is simply hardware costs for setting up the aquarium and doesn't include any of the livestock that actually goes inside. So the price of coral frags, fish, cleanup crew, anything actually living that you would later add to the aquarium. We're simply pricing out what it would cost to set up a saltwater reef tank in terms of the hardware. When it gets into corals, that has quite a large variation. One is going to be where you live. So I can tell you, based on customers that we have come down from the US, and I've been to many trade shows, to MACNA and to Reefapalooza, corals are way more expensive, in my opinion, in the United States than they are here in Canada. I know that they're cheaper, more so in Europe, and then if you're in Asia, they're a lot less expensive. You don't have the cost of shipping involved. Let's say if you live in Indonesia or Vietnam or Australia, where corals are readily found. I think we're sort of lucky here, at least in my experience, in terms of coral pricing based on what I see in the US. For a lot of people, customers, a lot of what we're selling is out of this tank right here, which is coral frags, just fragments of pieces, and people are more than happy to come in and buy smaller pieces like this and then grow them out. It's almost like planting seeds in your garden. Instead of going out and buying an entire tree or bush, you're planting something small, and then you get the enjoyment and satisfaction of watching it grow. But there are some quite crazy expensive corals, so that's a whole nother video on its own. When it comes to corals and fish, you might be happy spending $30-40 on a regular Nemo looking clownfish, regular Ocellaris, and then there's some crazy $250 platinums and snowstorms and quite expensive and what they call designer clownfish or high-end fish. But that's all going to be based on what you're comfortable spending. That's a whole separate video. I can't even begin to get into this one, so I thought I would just throw that out there. Anything we're talking about from this point on, it's simply the cost of setting up the aquarium in terms of the hardware. Okay, for our next pricing of the saltwater reef tank, we're going to go with something a little bigger, 50 to 60 gallons. This is a 55 Red Sea. That's sort of what we have in store. Let me talk to you and show you, and I'll use this as an example. So similar to the smaller ones, you're going to need a tank. So we'll start with the smaller budget. Glass aquarium, 50 to 60 gallons, somewhere between 150, 200 bucks, and then a stand. Let's say we're doing it the most budget friendly. Go ahead and build your own stand. You can, if you want to. It may not look the nicest, but a lot of people do it. That's going to cost you around 50 to 60 bucks. And then for a sump, so just to mention in this video, for this one, I'm not pricing out hang on the back filters or hang on the back skimmers. So we're talking proper sump, water draining down to the bottom. So what that means is your tank is actually drilled underneath and water drains down to the bottom, runs through a sump, and then with the return pump runs back to the top. I can do a whole video talking about why sumps are better than hang on the back filters and why they're preferred, but that's a proper reef setup. Drain it down into the sump. So on a really budget friendly build, you could just use a glass aquarium, silicone in some baffles, somewhere between 50 and 75 bucks. Your sump is done. You're going to need, different than the Nano tank, you're going to need a return pump to bring water back up from the bottom to the top, because unlike the all-in-one tanks that have the filter built in the back and the sump, it's on the bottom. So that can actually vary the price quite a bit. A budget-friendly pump, like the Jibao Chinese ones here, run you 100 bucks. They're actually quite reliable. They sometimes get a bad reputation online, but I'm using them personally. Run you about $100. If you want a serious pump, then we're talking, you know, a Vectra. It can really sway the price. But I'd say about $100 for a quality pump. You're going to need rock, no matter what sort of budget you're in, sand and salt again. So rock is about, you know, the old rule was a pound per gallon. I think it's about 3/4 of a pound to a gallon. So call it maybe 40 pounds of rock in there. And salt, I'm going to price in the same. Coral Pro Salt, just a bigger version. So it runs $100 here in Canada, but it'll do 160 gallons. So it's enough to fill up the tank and then some. You're still going to need some bacteria to get it going and some ammonia chloride. Pricing in the cheapest heater and a pair of inexpensive power heads. So nothing fancy, plug them in the wall. They're going to move the water around. Because you have a sump, you're also going to need a skimmer. So the cheapest sort of one that we offer is still going to run $225, but it's quality, it's reliable. You're going to need some plumbing parts to get the water down into the sump and back up to the top. And finally, you're going to need some lights. So the ones that I'm pricing into the least expensive 60-gallon build are these China, or they call them just black box LEDs. You can find them on Amazon. They're like 80 to 100 bucks each. They have a ton of power. We don't usually recommend them just because they're kind of like a lesser known brand. They're a dime a dozen out there. I personally had one of them catch fire years ago. So in the last shop that I had, instead of using Radions, I was on a budget and I ran those really expensive lights the length of the store. One of them, after 3-4 years, actually caught fire, and that's when I decided to spend the money and upgrade to the Radions. I'm not saying your lights are going to catch fire. I'm not trying to scare you out of using them. They're actually very powerful and very good lights. As cheap as I could possibly make this build for a 50 to 60 gallon, we're talking 1,300 Canadian. That's for a proper build with the sum. Works out to about $980 US. Now, if we upgrade some of the things and we're not so concerned with building the cheapest tank possible, I'd go with a little bit better heater. I get some wave makers over standard power heads. And for lighting, I would stick 2 of these nice AI primes over the tank, or instead of the cheaper Chinese sort of unknown black box ones you can grab on Amazon. With those upgraded things, you're looking about, the lights are actually the biggest change in price. So they add 700 bucks because the lights are probably the most expensive part of any aquarium build, and you can go cheap just about everywhere. Your return pump is still going to return water from the top to the bottom. Whether you go with a more expensive well-known brand or less well-known brand, your wave makers are still going to move water. So if you go with these $100, $80 pumps or $400 wave maker, these are really nice. I'm not trying to knock them. At the end of the day, they're all going to move water. Your skimmer's going to make bubbles. So those things, you can, if you feel like it, go a little bit cheaper or try and save some money. The one place, if you're going to spend the money, I always tell people, is spend it on the lights, because when you spend it on the lights, you're just going to get a better aquarium. It's the one place I usually encourage people to splurge. It looks expensive, it's scary, it hurts the wallet, you want to cry. I get it, I understand. Save up a little bit more, and then you're not going to want to upgrade in the future. You're not going to wish, shit, I should have got, you know, the Radions or the AI Primes or the Kessels or whatever light it may be that you're dreaming of, and you'll be without regret. If we upgrade to a little bit better equipment, it'll run us $2,700. That's what I've calculated here on this little list that I'm doing over on the side. In US, it works out to about 2,000 bucks. And then finally, if we go with the best of the best, creme de la creme, a pair of MP40s, the Vectra S2 crazy return pump. We deck it out with some Radion XR15 G5 blues, a better refractometer, really the best of the best equipment. And instead of buying just a tank with a stand and drilling it and doing all that, we go with something like this, which is a Red Sea complete all-in-one aquarium kit. The number I came up to was 5,940 Canadian dollars, which runs about 4,400 US. That's for a 55-gallon Red Sea Reefer. 250 is the model. It's the exact same one running here in the store, and that's getting you absolutely everything you need, but to the best. Like, you can't get better. We're talking the Lamborghini, the Ferrari of equipment, truly decked out with the best skimmer, the best return pump, the best that there is today on the market. Okay, finally, I'm going to price out for you about 100 to 120 gallons. So just going through my very organized list, as you can see here, I tally up all the things, the bare necessities that I could find that you would need to set up a 100-gallon tank, assuming that you built your own stand, you're using an aquarium as a sump, you're drilling it on your own. I came up with the number 2,200 Canadian dollars. Works out to about 1,600 US. That's using very inexpensive Chinese black box LED lighting and the most budget-friendly equipment that I could think of out there. You could probably get that number lower, you know, if you're handy, or if you're looking used, looking for deals, maybe picking up a used tank. Like, I did price the tank out brand new at 500 bucks. So you could probably get that number down a little bit lower. For budget-friendly builds, the number sort of works out to $25 a gallon. At least it did for all the ones that I've done today. You can maybe play with that number or comment below. What do you guys think? Is it possible to set up a 100-gallon, or let's say 120-gallon reef tank for less than 16, call it maybe even 1,500 bucks? With a little bit better equipment, we're talking Hydra 32 HDs for lighting, some Nero pumps like the ones I'm running, very similar to this kind of setup over here. With upgrading, really when you're upgrading the tank, there are a few things you're talking about: the power heads, the lighting, the skimmer, and the return pump. The glass is more or less the same unless you're going with like a low E Starfire kind of glass. The stand, the rock, the starting bacteria, the heater, there's a little bit of a difference. The way you measure salt, a little bit of a difference again. But a lot of those things kind of stay the same throughout the tanks. And then it's the added electronics. So if you add a Neptune to a system, it can get crazy expensive. You know, this runs thousands on its own. But it's really, like I said, the lights, the power heads, the return pump, and the skimmer, which can quite drastically vary the price of the tank. So running very similar to what we have going on in here. On this tank, I came up with the price of 4,000 Canadian, works out to about 3,000 US. Now let's say we go balls off the walls, we throw on some Radion XR30 Pros on that, and top of the line Red Sea Skimmer or Reef Octopus or Bubble Magus Curve 9 Elite, the best of the best MP40 power heads, and a really top of the line pump like the STC offered by Sicce, even the Vectra M2 or the Neptune Core 20 pump. These are some of the best ones on the market. I mean, no barriers when it comes to money or cost. I came up to 8,000 Canadian, which is about 6,000 US. And I mean, that's getting really the best of the best equipment. So as you can see, it does vary quite a bit, and it's kind of a hard question to answer when someone walks in the store. We get people coming in every single day of the week interested in starting a saltwater tank. They see videos on YouTube, they have an uncle, aunt, cousin, friend, relative, someone they knew in high school that has one of these tanks. They've sort of fallen in love with it without even being in the hobby, and that's a very common question we get. How much does it cost to start one of these things? And our response usually is, how much do you want to spend? You know, we can kind of give a rough estimation, but it's going to come down to your budget, what you're comfortable spending, what you're looking to spend to get into it. Obviously, the bigger tanks are quite a large investment. The idea for the video came yesterday. Someone picked up a tank. The total build came out to just about 15,000 for one of the larger Red Sea videos, and it kind of got me thinking what it costs to get your feet wet and get into the hobby. That's why when a lot of new customers come in and they're looking for their first ever saltwater experience, they're not too happy to hear us recommend this tank right here. They come in looking, you know, for something a little bit bigger for their living room or basement, and we almost stop them in their tracks and say, hold on, start with this. Start with them something small that's a little bit tricky to manage, and learn and practice on this one right here. If you can maintain 13.5 gallons of salt water and keep corals, you could easily keep a 50, 100, 200 gallon. When you go out and buy your first car, you're not going out and getting that convertible BMW as your first ride. Maybe you do. If you are, kudos, great, that's awesome. But for most of us, you get a beater. You get something you can kind of practice and bang up, and you know, it's not your absolute dream car, because the first 6 months to a year, unfortunately, in the hobby is learning. And that's how we learn, or how do we learn, sorry, is by making mistakes. I still make mistakes. Every week I'm uploading videos on how I continue to screw up after 15 years of experience. Our combined experience here in the store, if you take all the staff members, we're about 50 years of combined experience. We're still making mistakes, and that's why I often recommend people start small, spend a little bit of money, get your feet wet. Maybe you find out 6 months in, shit, this isn't what I thought, this is a lot of work. That's going to lead into the next video, which is how hard is it to keep a saltwater reef tank, more specifically a nano tank, because this is sort of where the industry is going, towards smaller and smaller tanks. I think as people's homes, at least in the Toronto area, get smaller and smaller, people live in condos, apartments, and basements, and it may not be practical to set up a 50, 60, 100 gallon aquarium. You don't have the space or the means of doing so. So these are really quite popular, and I recommend them to most new customers looking to get into the hobby. Grab one of these, practice, make mistakes, take all those lessons you learn on the small scale, and then you can take them and apply them to a much bigger, proper dream sort of setup, something like this. I think that's about it for today's video for pricing out reef aquariums. This is one of the longer ones I've did. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and if not, give me a thumbs down. I love the critique and the feedback because it's helping us always improve the comment. We always love to hear what you guys are thinking. At the end of this, I'm going to leave our email address so you guys can get in touch with us if you got any questions about setting one of these up, or about saltwater corals, or about Dylan's fragging skills on the bandsaw, or anything at all. Feel free to reach out to us. Our contact info is there. You can even call us. We're here in the Toronto area. We love talking about this stuff. This is what we do, saltwater corals, and thank you for watching this episode of Fragbox TV.